So, and it's absolutely fantastic to be actually see you, and I'll mention why that's really handy and really important later. So we're going to be talking about how to cut through the noise and get great clients today. I'm sure you're familiar with the social media era, that life is a bit like a penguin colony in terms of Can you hear me now? I think I went on mute momentarily. So pre the internet era, pre-social media, it was relatively quite easy to stroll along the high street and pop into each shop and see and talk with the shop owner or the people in the shop. Whereas, or go to an office or go to an event or a conference, literally back in those days, you had the telephone, you could meet face to face, or you could use directories, printed directories to find people. Now, social media era, we have access literally to the world, as you know. The upside of social media is that everybody has a voice. The downside is there are a lot more voices and a lot more clamour to break through, as I'm sure you're very familiar. I don't know if any of you have heard about Google's Zero Moment of Truth research, where they researched to say that on average, for one prospect to reach out and connect with you, they need to have seen 7 hours of your content, and they'll have seen aspects of your content 11 different times on 11 different occasions over 4 different channels. So, for example, Institute of Directors, you may have heard about it from a friend, you may have seen social media posts on LinkedIn about it, you may have seen their Director magazine, you may have visited the Institute of Directors on Pall Mall or in the kind of regional areas. And you may have seen that the 4 different channels is, it could be through a webinar type event, it could be printed media, it could be social media posts. So for one person to reach out and connect and engage with you, that's an awful lot of content. 7 hours of content you need to put out for them to see. They see some of that on 11 different occasions over a myriad of channels. So this is almost like the know, like, trust build-up. It's unusual to have a bluebird opportunity land on your lap as a business owner or a salesperson. Usually you have to work at it. You need to build rapport. So that number reflects that know, like, trust dynamic. So in this workshop, what we're going to look at is how we can reduce those numbers down, because they say 7 hours of content, that's an awful lot. And if, as a business owner or somebody promoting what you do, you'll know that you do have to do a lot of groundwork to actually reach out and connect with people. So we're going to look at some tips as to how we can short circuit some of that and make it easier for your prospects, your target prospects, to reach you. First thing to say is the era of setting out your shop front in words in the following way is over. So if you start with an A to Z of all the services you offer, how wonderful you might be, or how wonderful your business is, that no longer works. How I turn that round, how you need to turn that round, is coming from the customer's perspective. I'm going to use an example of an independent financial advisor, an IFA, but to be fair, it could be anybody. I'm not singling out independent financial advisors by any stretch. But if you turn that round, you'd be saying that shows up as an IFA with 25 years experience, who specializes in pensions, retirement planning, and investments in tax planning. So you've often seen that, I'm sure. We may be doing that ourselves in terms of showing the A to Z of our experience and what we sell in our shop, so to speak. Because it's so noisy, if everybody's doing that, nobody's going to hear that message, because it's not applicable to your target audience necessarily. So to hone it down to your specific target audience, represented by a penguin here, you need to produce clear, client-focused messages. So that would be turned around in the following way. So our independent financial advisor, John, he works with intelligent, savvy, discerning individuals who are in their 40s and 50s, who have invested for their future, but they have a problem. their problem is this: they don't have the time or inclination to get knee-deep in overwhelming financial maze of pensions and investments. Okay. And they have an idea of what they want to do with their life. So they may want to cruise around the Caribbean, they may want to go traveling, whatever their thing is. But they're not sure of the numbers they need to make that a real plan rather than just a long forward dream. So hopefully you can see the difference in the presentation of setting out your shop front with all the things that you have and you do, to turning it around to get those clear client focused messages. I'm sure you're familiar with the adage, if you try and go for everybody, you end up with nobody. So we've got targeted individuals here who've said their age, kind of in demographic, if you like. We know what their problem is. We're using easy language that they'd use themselves, and how you can address that and turn it round. But the thing is, what you need to do before any of this is obviously actually work out what those messages are and who your audience is. So I use a framework to do that, which is 3 concentric circles. So we look at you, we look at your team, if you have one, or your associates. We understand your values and your purpose. And of course, we look at your client and understand who they are. But to get those unique messages and bring those out, those differentiators, obviously, we combine all those elements to really find out what your client is looking for and what the gems are for your client. And we also look at the customer journey and experience in terms of trying to reach them. And I'm going to visually illustrate this throughout the workshop. But first, I'd like to tell you a story. If we go back to 1866 in South Africa, there was a diamond rush going on. A farmer, thrilled by the idea of making his fortune, sold his farm and went trading around the country to try and find diamonds. Unfortunately, it doesn't end well for him. He does, within a few years, becomes bankrupt and penniless. And I'll leave it there, but this is actually a true story, but you can read about that if you like. But let's go back to the farm that he sold. The new owner has a guest to visit. The guest inquires about these rocks that were on the mantelpiece. The new owner says, oh, those, I have rocks like that across the whole farm. Okay. The guest tells him that that rock on the mantelpiece is the biggest diamond known to man. Strangely enough, it doesn't look like these nicely polished ones. That farm became the Kimberley Diamond Mine in South Africa, which you may have heard of. Okay, one of the biggest diamond mines. So it is a true story. And why am I telling you the story? The reason I'm telling you this story is because I find with my clients, individuals and businesses, they're often sitting on their own diamonds into those differentiators and USPs. You don't have to go trailing around the country or the world to find them. They're usually actually within you. And I will explain a little bit more in, what I mean by that. So as a kind of formal introduction, my name is Denise Quinlan, as you may have seen, but I do what's called business development, but with a visual twist. So I specifically work with ambitious entrepreneurs and business owners who are superb at what they do, but they don't often necessarily articulate it in a way that resonates with their target prospects. And that's either because they're either too modest, or it's almost a kind of question of the wood for the trees, an issue of the woods for the trees. They've got so many ideas, so many fantastic things they do, they're too close to seeing what those diamonds and those gems are. So as an example, I often talk about a lovely client of mine where I was writing her LinkedIn profile, and long story short, this is pre-apartheid South Africa, sleeping on the South African theme. She was actually German, but she set up an office in South Africa just after the South Africa opened up. And she had a photograph of herself with Nelson Mandela. And I'm going, oh my word, that's gold dust. So in terms of having a photograph like that as a secondary image on your LinkedIn profile, that is so eye-catching and stands you out so much. Now, she was quite a modest lady, but also she's lived and breathed this story. It was too close to her for her to appreciate the gold that represents for her, the people around her. So that's a simple example of how you can differentiate yourself. I'll give you some other tips throughout this workshop now. To give you some background, these are the clients I've worked with. Now, I used to work for Oracle. I was with Oracle for 18 years doing mainly business development type roles. So that's where my kind of pedigree and background comes from. So I've worked with large organizations, but also small organizations as well. But it does come down to that entrepreneurial edge and that curiosity to look at how you continuously can improve and how you can reach your target clients and get those messages right. What I'm going to do here as a foundation is talk a bit about visual messaging specifically and why pictures speak louder than words. I saw Paul earlier in the audience, so thank you, Paul, for joining. So this is young Paul, but I'm sure you're aware of the phrase, "A picture paints 1,000 words." Another twist on that I like is words add the facts, images add the emotion. And images particularly add the emotion because the brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. If you think about it, we're born with the gift of being able to see. We're not born with the gift of being able to read. We have to learn that. So we have to translate those lines, shapes, squiggles, and dots into something meaningful. And that translation of those squiggles and shapes into something meaningful takes time, whereas image is a direct feed into the brain. No translation is needed. So it's super, super fast. Another twist on that same phrase that I like is words add the fact, images connect you. And images connect you specifically and particularly when there are faces in them. I'm going to let you look at this for a moment longer, and then we're going to go to our first poll.
Right, so that is launching on your screens now. So it's who can see the face? There's two options, yes or no idea what you're talking about. So 72% of people said yes, and 28% said no idea what you're talking about.
Fantastic.
And I'll pop back to Denise. Thanks.
Brilliant. Okay. So, I'll get rid of that. So, who could see the face? Fantastic. It's really interesting to see. So 72% of you could see the face, whereas 28% had no idea what I was talking about. Okay, so that holds true to the kind of numbers. This is from a Twitter feed called Faces in Things. So these lights, you may be able to see that there could be eyes, okay? And this hole is a mouth, okay? So I don't know that the 28% of people can now see that, or maybe not still. This is actually, those who could see it, you have a skill called pareidolia. Okay, it's actually a thing. Seeing faces in things is a thing. Okay, and pareidolia is the psychological response to seeing faces and other significant and everyday items in random stimulus. Okay, so it's either something you have or you haven't, and the majority of people have it, as borne out by that little exercise there. So thank you for participating in that. And the reason this pareidolia exists, it comes back to our primeval programming. So if you're on the savannah, it's a hot day, long grass, it's deserted, you're by yourself. You might be sticking your head up above the long grass just to see, are you safe or not? Literally what your brain is doing, even if you're not aware of it, is scanning for faces. Because if you see a face, you need to work out pretty promptly, can I trust them? Or do I need to run away? Is it a huge lion? Do I need to run away? So subconsciously, your brain is trying to keep you safe. So you may not be aware of that. So that's why we have this thing called pareidolia, and the majority of people have it. So do have a look at Faces and Things Twitter addresses if you want to see more of those sorts of things. So words add the facts, images connect you. For those of you who like stats, if you post on social media with an image, on average you will get 94% more views of that post than if you put a post up without an image. What I'm showing here is essentially as humans, we're very visual creatures. Okay. You may think that's quite a newfangled thing, but if you then go back 5,000 years and you come to hieroglyphics, it's kind of evidence that this is an ongoing thing. It's not new. What is new is the technology has changed so that we can disseminate messages and images, obviously at a touch of a button, literally. So for those of you who can see the screen, I love this hieroglyphic on the bottom line in the middle, if you can see my mouse pointer. So the little face with headphones on. 5,000 years ago, how did they know that we'd be wearing headphones? Anyway, so hiero means sacred and glyphic is a carved engraving. My belief is there's no such thing as coincidence. So these are today's modern sacred carved engravings. Okay. So I'm just reiterating, we're visual creatures. That hasn't changed at all. So we're now going to move across to poll number 2. But before I do that, I'd like to say the brain actually has 100 billion neurons. Neurons are cells that send messages. We have 5 senses. So the question is, 30% of our brain's neurons are devoted to one particular sense. Which sense is that? Is it A, hearing, B, touch, C, sight?
I'll launch that on your screens now. So 30% is devoted to which sense? Either hearing, touch, or sight. So it's 19% of people think it's devoted to hearing, 13% to touch, and 67% of you think that 30% is devoted to sight.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm leading the witnesses fantastically here. So it is indeed sight. So well done to 67% of you. I wonder if that happens to be the same number of people who have pareidolia abilities as well. I'm just wondering. So yes, sight is massive, essentially. 30% of our brain is devoted to sight. And that's for 3 main reasons. And it's all to do with survival of the species. So we need to be able to see to find food every day, to eat, for daily sustenance. We need to be able to survive. So flight or fight, as I've already mentioned. And literally we need to find our mate. So continuous to the species. So our sight is hugely evolved. But as I say, a lot of that is subconscious. So we take it for granted. And that's something I want to pull up and challenge. And I challenge people on specifically when we're presenting images, presenting our businesses, because it's the fastest way to communicate. So 8% of our brain is devoted to touch, and then 3% to hearing, if you are curious. Okay, so that just shows the kind of proportions: 30% to sight, 8% to touch, 3% to hearing. So sight is the greatest one and huge. So that's the foundation really in terms of our visual messaging. What I'm now going to look at is how we can apply that to yourself as a business individual and your business. So how do we cut through the noise now with that new knowledge and get new clients? The first thing we need to do is actually put a face to you and your business. The reason why I was really keen that I could see your faces and that you could see mine as a presenter. So we're going to look at how we do that. I'm going to look at you specifically. We're going to look at your team, and we're going to look at your clients, and we're going to look at how we show what you do and how we show how you're different. So first up is you. We're actually going to go to poll number 3 here. Bit of a question on first impressions. So how quickly does it take to form an impression of a stranger from seeing their face? Is it A, 1 minute, B, 5 seconds, C, a second, D, 1/10 of a second? Fingers on buzzers, everybody.
So I'll launch that now. And as Denise said, the options are 1 minute, 5 seconds, 1 second, or 1/10 of a second. So 1% of you think it's for 1 minute, 18% think 5 seconds, 39% think 1 second, and 41% of you think it's just 1/10 of a second.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And the answer is D, 1/10 of a second. So that 30% of our brain's neurons is working so hard. 1/10 of a second is a blink of an eye. It's super fast. So that's reiterating how fast our brain works, and to the extent we probably don't even realize how quickly it's working. So essentially, research does vary slightly, but it is in the microseconds area. But the big thing is, our brain does that processing on a first impression, whether we meet face to face or whether we see a photograph. The brain doesn't differentiate between 2D and 3D. So it could be a photograph or it could be in a film. We still go through that observation and analysis as to whether we're safe or not. So here's a photograph taken from a LinkedIn profile. I'll ask rhetorically at this stage, but what are your first impressions? You may notice he's taking a selfie photograph. You may notice it's actually in a lift mirror. Now, this may work for you, it may not. But the thing is, every picture is telling a story. Is it telling the story you want it to tell for the target audience you're trying to reach, whether that be influencers or prospects? Okay. Now, it may work, it may not. The brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. So this is on your LinkedIn profile or your website page. This is your headline. People are drawn to faces for that pareidolia reasons I mentioned earlier. So is it telling the story you'd like it to tell? I'd like to tell you about young Alex, a client of mine, who is an independent. He's a chartered financial planner, in fact. He had his photographs redone, and a new client came on board and gave him this feedback. You'll laugh when I say I looked through the list and you seem to have the nicest, most honest looking face. They went on to say, and I expect you think that's a strange approach. Now, the thing is, it's not strange at all to do that assessment as we've demonstrated in terms of first impressions. What is obviously strange about this is that the person has actually written in to tell Alex that. But of course, with any service that involves a large investment, particularly if it's our own personal investment, our life savings, we want to see that we can trust people. And that's evidence of that brain processing power going on to make sure either you're safe, but in the instance, in business, in practice, can you trust the person? They look like they're credible? Do they look like they can do what they say they do? Okay. So what happens when you don't have a profile photo, particularly when there's a space to put one? Okay. Essentially, the brain becomes suspicious. And that's, again, a human characteristic. It's nothing to be concerned about if you're wondering, why haven't they got a photo? It may beg some questions. And as Airbnb used to state when you signed up to their service, they believe that anonymity erodes trust. So again, that's a suspicion kicking in if you don't have a profile photo. But if you're trying to promote your services or your business, I'd kind of gently question why it is you wouldn't have your profile photo made available. Face-to-face is proven to be better than using a telephone for the 3 following reasons. 1, you'll talk for longer. 2, you'll laugh more. And 3, you'll be happier afterwards. So those of you who've suddenly had to grapple with Zoom and other similar things, this may be relevant. So back to the face thing, it's a relief at seeing other human beings, 23%. So if you're in self-isolation, or should I say solitary confinement, the relief at seeing other human beings is still very helpful by using video calls as opposed to using a telephone. Okay. And from all the TV interviews and news broadcasts where we're seeing into people's homes, the actual seeing checking out co-workers' houses and all the presenters' backgrounds is kind of something that is probably entertaining quite a lot of people. But let me look briefly again at kind of LinkedIn kind of profile photos. So here's some of my clients. These are their before photos that they had on LinkedIn and their intranets. These are the afterwards photographs. So these photos are appropriate for their target audiences. So you've got to be wary of what's appropriate for your target audience. It may not be this. You may also have noticed this gentleman has got medals. Indicates he's probably been in the services. He's actually a software developer. He served in Afghanistan. And when I was showing this to a business owner who develops websites and does SEO type work, he said he would absolutely get this young gentleman in for an interview because somebody who's been in the army will absolutely know what mission critical is and what a project deadline is, not an aptitude that everybody has. So your images are telling a story, as I mentioned earlier. Do you want to tell the story of you in the lift taking a selfie photograph, or do you want to show something about you? Now, we may not all have medals, but if you have something that stands you out, then it's worth considering creating that story that's relevant to you for your target audience. Okay. We talked about 7-11-4, the Google Zero Moment of Truth. So this is one way of short-circuiting those numbers. If you stand out with something slightly different, this is subconscious, it's subtle, it's subliminal, but people will remember the guy with the medals, possibly, dare I say, more so than the lady. We'd have to do tests on this, but or more than if he was just wearing a suit jacket without the medals. So it's standing out. So it's really subtle. But something like that helps reduce those 7-11-4 numbers down that I talked about at the beginning. I'm not going to go into profile photos anymore because I have actually got, I don't know if you can see, I've got a paper called 10 Profile Mistakes That Unwittingly Turn Your Prospects Away. And I'll tell you more about that at the end because I've got a free gift pack that's included. This paper is included in that, so you can download that and have a look at that and look specifically at how you can improve your LinkedIn profile, particularly from a visual perspective. So we're now going to go to poll number 4, which is, at the prospect of your business profile photo being taken, do you A, actively avoid it at all costs, B, grin and bear it, C, absolutely love being in front of the camera?
I'll launch that on your screen now. So as Denise said, at the prospect of your business profile photo, do you actively avoid it at all cost, grin and bear it, or absolutely love being in front of a camera? So 3% of you would actively avoid it at all costs, 58% would grin and bear it, and 39% of you absolutely love being in front of the camera.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Oh, it says kind of in the middle then, just over half of you grin and bear it. So well done for doing that, because that has great benefit for your business. As I'm saying here, it's about putting a face to your business, because it's all about your prospects and they want to see whether they can trust you or not. Okay. If we have inhibitions about the left freckle that or the teeth that we think aren't as straight as we'd want them, that's not what your prospect is looking at. I can tell you, I can absolutely swear that's not what they're looking at. So for this reason, for those of you who actively avoid it at all costs, this may specifically be for you, which is a video series on how to feel more comfortable in front of the camera when it's getting in the way of your business. So I've worked with a lovely lady called Dr. Josephine Perry, who's a sports psychologist, who is often seen on the BBC Breakfast Red Sofas, talking about things sporting and the psychology behind it. So she's borrowed a technique from the performance world around goals, preparation and support. So that video series, short video series, is available there to help literally reframe that for you. Now we're going to have a look at, we've talked a lot about you as an individual and how you present yourself and the visual messages that you can get, how you can present yourself visually. We're now going to look at the team, and you may recognize some of these characters. These are the IOD Advanced team members, if you haven't seen them in person. We have a website page here. I don't know, depending on your screen resolution, you should see a black banner across across the screen, yeah, I can get some nods, that's good. You may be able to see that there are faces set back within that black banner, okay? So that's the team. So this is a software company, that's their team. They look quite friendly, they look quite, you know, friendly and happy individuals. They look quite relaxed, yeah, they're not suited and booted. So they're saying quite a bit about them that your subconscious brain is picking up straight away, even if you're not aware of it, okay? So they're saying it's about people. You can do this in different ways, but I personally love the way they've done that, okay? So that's their team, their asset. We also have here the IOD Advanced team. I'm afraid Anna's not in this photograph. James, we need a new one.
I wasn't quite there yet.
Anna's newer to the team. So I posted this on LinkedIn and it got lots of comments because of the top picture especially. Now you might pass over it and not think have another second thought about it. But there's a good chance, particularly kind of 72% of you, you'll be drawn in for a microsecond longer than you would be in the second picture. And that's because it's telling slightly more of a story. You might be wondering what they're laughing about. You might be thinking, gosh, they're so unprofessional. You may be thinking different things, but you're being drawn in for a microsecond longer. So again, I say it's subtle. It doesn't have to be outrageous, but in terms of 7-11-4, reducing the number of times your prospects spot and identify you, having something that stands you out subtly helps reduce that number. So evidence that it doesn't have to be outrageous in any stretch of the imagination. But I always say in terms of your team, in the same way, if you don't have your own profile photo in LinkedIn or on your website, if you don't have your team or the management team or the leadership team showing on your website, then it's the modern day equivalent of having a shop with no staff. That would never happen. You'd never have a shop with no staff in it, maybe apart from now. But show your team. The Meet the Team page or the Contact Us is the most frequently visited page of any website. So again, if you're trying to show yourself as a friendly, customer-friendly, approachable organization or business, then having those faces for the pareidolia reasons I mentioned earlier is really important, okay? People want to build trust. They want to get a sense of can they trust you? Can they see themselves working with you? So it's really subtle stuff, but so many businesses don't do this. So now we're going to look at clients. Hello, Bianca. I know you're on the call. So this is Bianca's team, one of my other clients. So Bianca does owns Pod Fitness, and they do small group personal training. And I actually did one of her Zoom calls this morning in my own living room. So you can still do exercise even in these tougher times. So you're getting a sense here of her clients. Okay, they all look quite colourfully presented. So can you see yourself exercising alongside these individuals? It's small group personal training, so she has groups of a maximum of 8, so 4 or 8. So you're getting a sense straight away. It's outdoors. Another one of her USPs, she only does her training outdoors, okay, apart from during these times. So it's outdoor personal training. I'm going to show another of my clients who produced a medical device for a very unsexy product, in the sense it's actually for urinary incontinence. So I'm going to show you the leaflet. Don't worry, it's not graphic. I'm going to show you the leaflet they had when I first started working with them that was promoting their product. This is the leaflet after the work I did with them. It may or may not work for you. They're targeting women in their 40s and 50s who have pelvic floor issues, okay? So we've got some ladies who are in their 40s and 50s, okay? They're smiling, they're friendly. your brain will be, for the majority of you, your brain will be drawn in because you like to see faces. We like to see faces. If you happen to be a woman who is in their 40s and 50s, you may identify with these ladies, so you're drawn in again. So part of this process in reducing those 711-4 numbers is to draw people in, okay? And people, as we know, buy from people like them, okay? So strangely enough, if you show who you're trying to reach, they will then, people will identify much more easily with that, okay, or who they're looking at. So we're going to have a quick look at a customer testimonial. Don't worry about the detail, but the customer testimonial happens to be here. The app is very easy to use. There are plenty of jobs available. They also have an outstanding team to support you all the way if you need anything. Okay, fair enough. It's a testimonial. The same testimonial, but we've got a name on it. Okay. Typically that makes it more credible. It feels like it's attributed to somebody. It's not made up. Dare I say, I've been in marketing departments. It's not been made up by the marketing department. Okay. Who looked at the face first? Possibly 72% of you. Okay. So having that face is like a Belisha beacon for the majority of people. Okay. Even if you don't recognize faces, as you've seen evidence, the majority of people do. So having a photograph of the person who's given the testimonial is the Belisha beacon. It draws people's attention to that testimonial, either on your website, on printed material, on social media. Okay. And the key thing is, this is an app for hospitality, jobs in hospitality. So we have a young gentleman here, and he's the kind of age group and the type of person they're trying to attract. So strangely enough, like attracts like. So show who you're trying to reach and they will naturally be attracted to this. Okay. So pareidolia in actually working. So gosh, we've trotted through you, we've looked at you, we've looked at your team, we've looked at your clients. Now we're going to have a quick look at showing what you do. Now, if you're selling a house, I can guarantee there will always be a photograph of the house. If anybody has ever sold a house without showing a photograph, please tell me. I'd love to hear about it. So we show home houses. What I'm encouraging you to do is actually to show home your business. What do I mean by that? So Heathrow, one of my clients, they have a careers and jobs fair for young people. They have 16 to early 20-somethings who come along to this event, and they have probably about 70 to 80 stand holders. So they have British Airways represented, they have construction companies, restaurant, hospitality. As you can imagine, the Heathrow economy is huge. So they have every business represented. But the one that stood out for me fantastically at this event, because they absolutely show-homed what their business or what their organisation did, was actually the Home Office Border Force team. So you can see their stand is mobbed, and it was mobbed the whole day. Why is that? Well, first of all, they've got a polar bear skin, you might see, draped across their stand. Is that one of their USPs? Is that one of their differentiators? Let's fight our way through the crowd and see what everyone's looking at. Okay. So we've got a stuffed caiman, small alligator. It's only recently realised that's what the caiman is, and that's why we call them the Cayman Islands. If you can see on your screens, we've got a tusk, an ivory tusk, and we've got a briefcase which happens to be full of drugs. Okay. So they are showing fantastically what they do as a business. They're show-homing themselves. They're showing the sex and the sizzle, depending on your perspective, of what it is they do. And I think it attracted the young people's attention. I think it would attract most adults' attention as well. Seeing a polar bear skin is pretty unusual, obviously, because it's not allowed. So they do a really good job. So how do we take that example to our own businesses? We probably haven't got caiman tusks or polar bear skins to show off in terms of showing what we do. So I'm now going to turn to one of my other clients. believe Alison was due to be on the call. Hopefully she is. So her business is career transformation, and she has a group of career transformation coaches. So they're very colourful. They're very vibrant. They seem to be based in London. There's a kind of photograph of St. Paul's in there, so suggesting it's kind of London-based. They've got some fancy wallpaper or some unusual wallpaper on the background, but they do one-on-one coaching and they do group coaching. So you're getting a bit of a sense of what it might be like to be sat in those rooms, being that person there. Are you the age group or the kind of demographic of person they're trying to reach? You may be, you may not be. Does this resonate for you? Or would you kind of like, this is absolutely not my thing? Okay. By setting out your store, you're automatically drawing in the people who look like you in these photographs. Okay. So that's Alison and her team. So we're getting to the final one in this series here on working through you, your team, your clients, showing what you do and showing why you're different. So in summary of that, if you like the Venn diagram version of that, we need to bring out those diamonds and showing why you're different. And that often comes down to, I mean, evidently we're not talking about commodity items here. We're talking about businesses where customer service, where trust and rapport is very important to your business or organization. But it's very much about finding those diamonds, those gold dust moments, and representing them in the best way we can visually. Okay, so we need to define that in words, okay, and then represent that visually, because visual is the quickest way to communicate. And we're looking to reduce that 7-11-4 number down. So overall, the message to you, it is a visual world. People connect with people, okay, regardless of the technology. If we're talking about services and products that have a value add, we're talking about people-based process, most likely in terms of selling and influencing. It is about know, like, trust. So that's 7-11-4, we're looking to reduce that down. But it is about telling a story. In every image is telling a story. Make sure it's the right one. Often what happens is we spend hours pontificating over words and then slap in some photographs, which may be, as we realize, the photographs are getting the headline. We're processing those images within 1/10 of a second. And if the images aren't really resonating or working with your target clients, they're not going to read on. Pictures do speak louder than words by the evidence given. So if you're doing any of this, go steer the advantage, because I can assure you the majority of businesses aren't touching a small percentage of how to communicate in today's social media world. So thank you for listening to that. I mentioned I've got a free gift pack of resources. So either screen grab or get ready to take down the URL that I'm going to give you, which is a bit.ly link. So we've got the 10 profile mistakes document. I've got 5 common visual website mistakes as well, and the video series I mentioned. So there's the bit.ly link if you'd like to access those free resources. So http://bit.ly/free gift pack. So you might want to write that down or take a screen grab if you're able to do that. So http://bit.ly/free gift pack.
I'll send it in an email, a follow-up email as well.
Brilliant, fantastic. We also have a visual impacts business scorecard where you can do some self-assessment on how you're presenting your business visually. And I've also got 5 free 30-minute strategy reviews. So in those, we review where you are, where you want to be, and how I can help you get there. So if you want to book one of those slots, please send me an email to denise@insightfulimages.co. Well, thank you, Anna, for hosting. It's very kind of you. And thank you to everybody for staying. I wonder if the fact that we can see faces, you actually laughed longer or stayed on here longer, and we'll feel better afterwards. So thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure.